The nightclub, the speedboat, the mob, men and women drinking together, the booze cruise, the spread of jazz, the cocktail. What do they all have in common? They're the results, direct and indirect, of Prohibition, the nearly 14-year period from 1920 to 1933 when the manufacture, sale, or transportation of intoxicating liquor was illegal in this country. Why do you love the story so much?
It's the answer to that question, how the hell did that happen?
Daniel Okrent is author of Last Call, The Rise and Fall of Prohibition.
I mean, it's just so improbable. How did this freedom-loving country put into the organic law, into the Constitution, this unbelievable stricture that said that you can't have a glass of beer? It's really hard to believe.
Part of the reason was simply that Americans like to drink a lot.
This country was very, very drunk. In 1830, the average American over 15 years of age drank 7.3 gallons of pure alcohol a year. That's the equivalent of 90/5 of 80-proof liquor, 1.8 bottles per week for every drinker in the country.
Alcoholism is a serious social problem. It was a social problem in the 19th century, which prompted Prohibition. It is today.
Producers Ken Burns and Lynn Novick collaborated on documentaries about jazz and baseball. In their newest film, airing tonight on PBS, they take on Prohibition.
It was clear that millions of Americans had now come to support Prohibition for all sorts of reasons.
Prohibition was billed, they point out, as the one-size-fits-all cure for the ills of American society.
Prohibition was really sold as not just that it would solve the problem of alcoholism, it would solve poverty, it would solve child labor, it would solve prostitution, it would solve crime, it would get rid of slums.
With so many problems to address, it's not surprising that the Dry Coalition was dizzyingly diverse. Suffragettes who originally wanted the vote so they could outlaw demon liquor. Small-town Protestants threatened by the wave of Catholic immigrants and their city saloons. The Ku Klux Klan who exploited the pernicious stereotype of the dangerous black man with a bottle. Even Broadway producers who wanted patrons out of bars and in their theaters. This is sort of the epitome of strange bedfellows.
Yeah, if you can imagine a very large bed that accommodates, some guy wearing a KKK uniform, somebody from the Industrial Workers of the World, Jane Addams and J.J. Schubert of the theater chain, that's a very strange set of bedfellows.
And is it true that the KKK supported women's suffrage?
KKK supported women's suffrage, and the KKK supported it because they knew that women would support Prohibition.
Jeez.
Jeez, that's the story of Prohibition. It's all jeez, who knew? Yeah.
But who could possibly wrangle this crazy quilt coalition?
I think it's clear that the ASL was the most powerful lobbying group. They actually made a constitutional amendment happen.
The ASL, or Anti-Saloon League. What made them so effective?
Look, they said to you, I don't care what you think about whether babies ought to be slaughtered or whether we should start wars. We don't care about any of those things at all. You're with us on our one issue.
It's one issue. So they weren't party affiliated?
They were not party affiliated, and they, in fact, had strong influence, very strong influence in both parties by design. The organization that's most like them today is the NRA. One issue. That's all we care about.
And the League's seat of power? Not New York, not Washington, but Westerville, Ohio.
So in here was the headquarters of the Anti-Saloon League.
Nina Thomas is an archivist at the town's Anti-Saloon League Museum.
As you see right here, there's a poster that says the saloon or the boys and the girls. Just that emotion of, would you rather have a saloon or would you rather have your children?
The League employed 200 people in a state-of-the-art printing operation that generated 40 tons of propaganda a month. The message was clear. Shall the mothers and children be sacrificed to the financial greed of the liquor trade? It's up to you to decide. Even if the facts sometimes weren't.
Do you know one insane person in every four owes his insanity to drink?
Pivotal to Prohibition's passage, anti-German sentiment fomented by World War I. Schlitz, Pabst, Anheuser-Busch. All of them German.
They linked the Germans to the brewers. So people had that kind of in the back of their head that this is un-American.
Though the brewers and distillers had vast financial resources, they were inept campaigners. Here's an ad extolling the virtues of beer. The public relations strategy of the Wets, I mean, some of the ads, a baby with a beer stein.
Yeah, the brewers wanted to separate themselves from the distillers. They maintained that gin and whiskey, that was horrible, poisonous stuff, whereas our beer was healthy. They actually called it liquid bread.
The Dries had the Wets over a barrel, and the 18th Amendment went into effect at midnight on January 17, 1920. After Prohibition became law, how soon was it that it became clear that it wasn't going to work?
Well, one could say it didn't work by around 2 a.m. on January 17th. I think that the general feeling was in the first year that it could work and that it was working. But as people found ways to exploit the loopholes, as criminality expanded, as the saloons were able to turn themselves into speakeasies and all you need to do was bribe a local cop or judge, these things began to snowball as early as 1921, 1922.
Legitimate enterprises were corrupted and respect for the law corroded. Drugstores allowed to dispense medicinal alcohol became virtual liquor stores. The Walgreens chain went from 20 stores to 525. But the ultimate buzzkill for Prohibition?
Really is the Depression, this incredible crisis that I think, made America kind of take another look and say, wait, what are our priorities? Is this really that important? We're spending all this money to enforce a law that nobody wants?
In the first few years, drinking did decline 70% from pre-Prohibition levels. But the Dries were up against something even more powerful than money.
What you can't successfully legislate against is human appetite. And if people want something, they're going to find a way to get it.
On December 5th, 1933, the 21st Amendment passed, ending Prohibition.
And Prohibition is repealed.
The only time in history an amendment has been repealed. The noble experiment was over.
It was a failure by any measurement, but positive in its failure. We learned from our failures. We learned, let's not try this again.